heard his voice echo down the marble hallway. It was low, taut with frustration. A voice I had learned to decipher more by tone than by words over our short, fragile marriage. I stood behind the half-closed door of the study, heart pounding so violently I feared he might hear it. "Miranda is pregnant," Ethan said flatly. "I'm sorry, Catherine, but I want a divorce." A chill swept through me, starting at the base of my spine and rising until it lodged in my throat. I tried to step back, but my knees wobbled, forcing me to brace against the wall. In that moment, I remembered how we had exchanged vows in front of a crowd of well-meaning friends and family. How we had smiled at each other, wearing masks that barely concealed our deeper truths. He had married me fully aware that I couldn't bear children, a medical verdict I had lived with since I was a teenager. For a time I had believed that he didn't mind. Or at least I had wanted to believe that. The reality was more painful. Ethan had married me only because he was waiting for her, his first love, to return. Now not only had she come back into his life, but she was also carrying his child. The moment I realized that everything between us, every gentle gesture, every polite smile, was a hollow imitation of real love, something in me died. Yet along with the agony came a surge of clarity. If Ethan wanted to leave me for Miranda, if he had always planned this the moment she reappeared, then perhaps this marriage had never been mine to hold on to in the first place. I shut my eyes, recalling the warm, hopeful girl I once was. This was not the life I imagined. This was not the love I had prayed for, the bond one once believed worth fighting for. Summoning the last vestiges of my dignity, I steadied myself. A door had closed on one dream, and the echoes of that slam reverberated through my soul. I stood on a precipice between heartbreak and an uncertain future, wondering which path I could possibly take next. Little did I know that fateful moment would mark a beginning as much as an end. Chapter 1: The Shattered Vow. I recall the first time I met Ethan Walker. It was at a charity ball organized by a mutual acquaintance, an event swirling with laughter and champagne, the women in silky gowns, the men in sharp black suits. I was there under duress, having no real desire for social gatherings, but my mother insisted it would be good for me. She believed the heartbreak over my medical condition, my inability to conceive, had stripped me of hope and youth. Perhaps she was right. I was 24 at the time but felt decades older. When I locked eyes with Ethan that night, I did feel a spark of something. His gaze was intense, as though he saw past my guarded exterior. We barely spoke at first, exchanging only a few pleasantries. Yet the air between us crackled, a tenuous thread that left me half thrilled, half terrified. He invited me to dance, and I surprised myself by accepting. It was a slow waltz, one where I had plenty of time to memorize the subtle flecks of amber in his deep brown eyes. My heart fluttered, but I told myself it was just the excitement of the music, the romantic illusions conjured by the warm light of the chandeliers. Later he asked for my number. And later still he took me to dinner in a quiet restaurant overlooking the city lights. I remember how gentle he seemed, how carefully he listened. I confided in him my fear that I might never have a normal family life. I had never been the type to confess secrets so soon, but something in his composure coaxed honesty from me. He placed his hand over mine. "Catherine," he said softly, "I'm not the type to judge someone by what they can't do. I'm more interested in who you are." His words soothed the jagged edges of my insecurities, if only for a moment. Perhaps that was the first crack in my fortress, the first time I allowed myself to hope that I could be loved despite my condition. Over the next months, we courted in a delicate dance. Ethan had a stable career managing a series of upscale hotels inherited from his late father. I was a freelance designer for children's clothing boutiques. Ironic, I often mused that I created garments for little ones I might never have. My creative spirit meshed well with Ethan's practical approach to life. At least that was what I believed. He proposed to me after 6 months. It wasn't an elaborate affair. No fireworks, no public spectacle. Instead, it was an intimate moment in his living room. He had cooked me dinner, a slightly oversalted risotto, and we sat amid the glow of a single lamp. There Ethan dropped to one knee, ring in hand, and asked, "Will you spend the rest of your life with me, Catherine?" I remember being overcome by emotion, tears spilling down my cheeks as I nodded yes. A tiny voice inside me whispered it was too soon, that we still had so much to learn about each other. But I silenced that caution. I wanted so desperately to believe that love, real, abiding love, had found me at last. I did notice during our engagement how he seemed distant at times as though lost in thought. But I blamed it on work pressures. I didn't know then that those quiet moments concealed memories of Miranda Lewis, his first love, the woman who had once left him behind in pursuit of her own dreams. We were wed in a modest ceremony, just family and close friends. I wore an ivory gown that trailed with soft lace. He stood at the altar looking solemn yet handsome. My mother cried, my father beamed. As I said my vows, I felt tears gather in my eyes, a heady mix of gratitude and apprehension. Meanwhile, Ethan's voice was strong, though his gaze seemed to flicker, just once, to an empty pew near the back of the church. Had I asked him then whose absence he mourned, would he have told me? Would I have realized that vow was not wholeheartedly mine to claim? But I didn't. And so we began our life together, a husband and wife existing in a delicate bubble of politeness. It wasn't until much later that I discovered the truth. He had married me with no intention of making a true life with me. He had married me in essence to wait for Miranda. Chapter 2. A House Without Warmth. Our home, located on a quiet street lined with oak trees, was beautiful on the surface. Large windows, a manicured lawn, tasteful furniture. But it lacked something intangible, some essential spark. There was a hush to the rooms that never faded, as though we were guests in our own marriage, afraid to disturb the silence. When I think back, I realize how lonely I felt even in those early weeks. Ethan tried to be cordial. He would ask about my day, share anecdotes about his business ventures. Yet an invisible wall always stood between us. I chalked it up to adjustment pains, telling myself that real intimacy might take time. But as days turned to months, I found myself longing for more. More warmth, more genuine laughter, more real connection. He rarely touched me. Our physical intimacy was careful, almost obligatory, lacking that raw passion I had foolishly imagined for us. At first I blamed myself. Perhaps if I wore more alluring clothes, styled my hair differently, or perfected my cooking, he would be drawn to me with real affection. So I tried. I learned new recipes, decorated the house with fresh flowers, placed small notes in his briefcase. His responses were always polite, sometimes mildly grateful, but never enthusiastic. I told myself that this was simply his nature. Reserved, composed, not easily given to displays of emotion. Still, a nagging doubt lingered in the back of my mind. Was he truly content or merely resigned? Despite our stilted interactions, we fell into a routine that resembled marriage in its outer form. We hosted dinner parties for his business associates, greeted my parents for weekend brunches, and occasionally went to charity events together. In public, we appeared a refined couple, each fulfilling the role society expected. Only I felt that undercurrent of emptiness more keenly with each passing day. One evening, about 4 months into our marriage, I gathered the courage to approach Ethan about the possibility of adoption. We were sitting by the fireplace in the living room, him reading a newspaper, me knitting a baby blanket for a friend's upcoming shower. I set the knitting aside, heart pounding. Ethan, I began softly, have you ever considered adoption? I know I can't have a child of my own, but there are so many children who need homes. He lowered the newspaper, studied me with an inscrutable expression. I haven't thought much about it, he replied in a measured tone. But if it's something you want, we can discuss it. His words were non-committal, lacking any flicker of excitement. So I reached for hope. I'd like to raise a child with you, to build a real family. But I understand if it's too soon. He paused as though weighing what to say. Let's hold off for a while, Catherine. Our schedules are hectic and an adoption process can be complicated. Maybe in the future. I forced a smile, nodding as if satisfied. But in my chest, a heaviness took root. Why did his voice sound so detached, as though the concept of fatherhood held no appeal for him at all? That night, while he slept on his side of the bed, I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling. A single question echoed through my mind. If Ethan truly loves me, why does this marriage feel so barren? Little did I know the answer was simple: he was still waiting for someone else. And I was just the stand-in. Chapter 3. Echoes of Miranda. I learned Miranda's name entirely by accident, during a moment when Ethan believed I was out of earshot. It was a rare day off for both of us, and we were lounging in separate parts of the house. I had gone upstairs to retrieve a book from the study, a cozy room decorated with mahogany shelves and plush chairs. As I approached, I heard his voice on the phone. He spoke quietly, but the hush of the house amplified every word. I froze, torn between respecting his privacy and my growing unease. The name Miranda flitted through the air like a ghost, making my heart skip a beat. "I know, Miranda," he said, a note of weariness lacing his tone. "But you chose to leave. I had to move on somehow." A pause followed, then he murmured, "I won't do anything rash. Let's just keep talking." My pulse thundered in my ears. It felt as if a door had opened onto a room of the house I never knew existed, one in which Ethan's real feelings lived, away from my gaze. I quietly backed away, swallowing hard, and retreated to our bedroom. There I paced, my mind swirling with questions. Who was Miranda? Friend? An ex-girlfriend? Why did he speak as though her choices had shaped his life so profoundly? When he finally ended his call and came downstairs, I forced a casual smile. "Everything all right?" I asked. He nodded. "Just some business issues. Don't worry about it." He's lying. The realization stung. But I had no proof of wrongdoing beyond a sense of dread. And I was too afraid to ask directly, too fearful of what I might discover. I rationalized that people are entitled to private conversations, that maybe I was being paranoid. Yet the name lingered ghost-like in my thoughts. Over the following weeks, I saw subtle changes in Ethan. He checked his phone more often, smiled to himself sometimes as though remembering a secret joke. At night, he would pace in his study instead of coming to bed. And despite all this, we never discussed the possibility of adoption again. One afternoon, as I was cleaning out old boxes from our storage closet, I stumbled upon a photograph. Ethan, younger, leaning against a car with his arm around a beautiful brunette. Her eyes sparkled with a joyful mischief. His expression radiated an easy warmth I had never seen on him. On the back of the photo, in neat cursive, was a single word: Miranda. My stomach twisted. I had my confirmation now. Miranda was not just a friend or fleeting romance. The love in that photograph was unmistakable. In an instant, I realized that Ethan's heart had once belonged to her in a way he had never given to me. Clutching the photo, I sank onto the edge of the bed, tears burning in my eyes. How was I supposed to compete with a love so clearly cherished? Why had he married me if she still held him so tightly in memory and heart? I tried to calm myself, to remember that I had no reason to suspect they were in contact. I did. I had overheard that phone call. Suddenly, so many small, inexplicable gaps in our marriage crystallized into one bitter truth. Ethan might have legally wed me, but his devotion lay elsewhere. That evening, I hid the photo back in the box and said nothing. The ache in my chest expanded, threatening to consume me. I had become an unwilling participant in a triangle I never agreed to join. Chapter 4. Confronting the distance. The tension in our house increased after that revelation. Perhaps it was my own guilt, feeling as though I had intruded on his privacy, that stopped me from voicing my suspicions. Or maybe I feared that hearing the truth from his lips would shatter me completely. So I let the unspoken tension fester, a silent parasite gnawing away at my heart. Still, a part of me fought to salvage our marriage. After all, I had taken vows. I had promised to stand by Ethan in good times and bad, even if it felt more like a one-sided pledge. So I tried once again to bridge the gap. I started cooking elaborate meals, surprising him at his office with coffee, planning weekend getaways. I hoped to ignite some spark in his eyes, to make him see me as more than a placeholder. For a while it almost worked. We had a few pleasant afternoons, especially when we visited my parents in the countryside. My mother fussed over Ethan, praising his business acumen, while my father teased him about fatherhood. But when the conversation turned to children, Ethan's entire demeanor would turn stiff. He would politely change the subject or find an excuse to leave the room. I recognized the pattern all too well. One late evening after we returned from such a visit, I mustered the courage to speak. We were in the living room. The only light came from a lamp near the sofa. Ethan sat reading over business documents, but I could tell he wasn't fully focused. "Ethan," I said quietly, taking a seat beside him. "Can we talk?" He looked up, surprise flickering across his face. "Of course." I clasped my hands together, forcing my voice to remain steady. "You've seemed preoccupied lately. Distant. I want to help, but I don't know how." He exhaled, setting the papers aside. "It's just work," he lied again, or so I suspected. I bit my lip. "Are you sure? Because I feel like there's something more." We haven't really discussed anything personal in a long time. We don't talk about children or adoption anymore. You don't seem interested in," my throat constricted, "in being a husband to me beyond formalities." His jaw tightened. For a moment I thought he might spill the truth, might admit that Miranda's calls were pulling his mind elsewhere. Instead he reached for my hand, giving it a perfunctory squeeze. "Catherine, I'm doing my best. Maybe I'm just not good at emotional stuff." Emotional stuff. That was the best he could offer me. A wave of disappointment washed over me, but I pressed on. "I'm not asking for grand gestures. Just honesty. If you're unhappy, if you—" He released my hand abruptly. "I'm tired," he muttered. "We can talk more later." Then he got up, left the room. The click of the bedroom door shutting behind him felt like a slap. There would be no real talk, no baring of his soul. Another attempt to reach him had failed. I remained on the sofa, alone with my regrets. The clock on the mantel ticked away the seconds, each one a subtle reminder that time was slipping through my fingers. Our marriage was unraveling and I had no idea how to hold the threads together. Had he always been this unreachable, or had I simply refused to see the signs? My head spun with quiet despair. If I confronted him outright about Miranda, would it make a difference? Or would it only accelerate the collapse I dreaded? Chapter 5. Torn between two worlds. Weeks blurred into months. I threw myself into work, designing children's clothes for local boutiques, coordinating with small manufacturers. There was a certain irony in dedicating my life to tiny outfits when I knew I could never have a child fill them. But focusing on those designs offered me a sense of purpose. I might not have been able to create life, but I could create beautiful things for others who did. Meanwhile, Ethan traveled more frequently. He claimed it was all business: inspect the new hotel in Boston, close a deal in Chicago, meet potential investors on the West Coast. He would leave for days, sometimes weeks, returning home to a dutiful kiss on my forehead. I told myself it was normal for a businessman of his caliber, but in truth I suspected that somewhere on those trips, Miranda hovered like a shadow. On one particular morning I walked into the kitchen to find him packing a small suitcase. He was leaving again, heading to a new city to finalize negotiations. My stomach churned with apprehension. But I tried to appear nonchalant, placing a plate of scrambled eggs on the table. "You'll be gone for a week this time?" I asked. He nodded, sipping black coffee. "Maybe 2, he amended. "I'm not sure how complex the contract will be." I forced a nod, hugging my arms around myself. A question burned in my throat. "Is Miranda there? Are you going to see her?" But I remained silent, too afraid of the answer. After breakfast we said our goodbyes with mechanical politeness. He left and the house felt emptier than ever. It was as though a gust of wind had swept away all color, leaving me in grayscale monotony. I tried to quell the nagging suspicion with distractions. I visited my mother, helped her with a charity bake sale. I met up with a friend for coffee, though I found it difficult to feign cheerfulness when she asked about married life. Mostly, I retreated to my small sewing room, letting the hum of the machine quiet my thoughts. Yet every so often I caught my reflection in the mirror. My eyes seemed hollow, my mouth set in a perpetual line. I realized how lonely I had become, existing in a marriage that lacked true partnership. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to leave him, not without understanding his heart, not without at least hearing him say the words out loud. Late one night, as I stared at the half-finished dress spread on my work table, I made a decision. I had to know the truth. I couldn't keep living in limbo. If he was with Miranda, if she had truly returned into his life, I had to face it. So I booked a flight to Boston, telling myself I was simply going to surprise my husband. I knew which hotel he was supposed to be staying at. The Walker family chain had properties across the city. Perhaps I would see him alone, or perhaps I would find him with her, the fabled Miranda. My chest tightened at the thought, but I had to do it. The uncertainty was destroying me more than any painful truth could. I left the next morning, a bag packed with minimal clothes and a trembling heart. I told my mother I had a business trip, not wanting to reveal the real reason for my sudden departure. On the flight, I stared out the window, the clouds a blur beneath us, trying to ignore the knot twisting in my stomach. Whatever I found in Boston, at least I wouldn't be hiding in the dark anymore. Chapter 6. The First Glimpse of Truth. I arrived at the Walker Hotel in downtown Boston, a towering structure of glass and steel. My hands shook as I checked in, giving a polite smile to the receptionist who recognized me from my last stay with Ethan. She offered me an upgraded room and I accepted, feeling the tension coil tighter in my gut. For a day, I wandered the city alone, waiting for the perfect moment to approach Ethan. I called his cell phone once, but it went straight to voicemail. Perhaps he was in a meeting or perhaps he was ignoring me. By nightfall, desperation gnawed at my resolve. On the second morning, I gathered my courage, determined to find Ethan in his suite. He always reserved the penthouse level for himself. My heart pounded as I rode the elevator up, the digital numbers glowing ominously. At the top floor, I stepped out into a plush hallway. A housekeeping cart was parked near the suite door. I hesitated, debating whether to knock. Before I could decide, the door opened, and out stepped a woman, a trim brunette dressed in a casual shirt and jeans, rummaging through her purse. I froze. She looked so familiar, though older than the photograph I'd found. She glanced up, her eyes meeting mine. For a split second, time seemed to stretch, a heavy tension thrumming in the air. She broke the silence first, offering a cautious smile. "Hello. Did you need something?" My voice came out strangled. "I'm looking for Ethan Walker. Is he inside?" She pursed her lips, nodded. "He's getting ready. Are you a friend?" The question felt like a slap. "Friend? I'm his wife," I forced out, each syllable nearly choking me. Her face paled. "Oh, I see." She cast a glance over her shoulder at the suite door, then stepped aside to let me pass. "I'm Miranda Lewis," she added quietly, as though that name alone would explain everything. I stumbled forward in a daze, each footstep an echo in my chest. So this was her. Miranda. She was indeed the woman from the photograph, but there was more to her now. A certain subdued weariness in her eyes, as though life had not been kind to her either. Before I could speak, the door opened wider and Ethan appeared. He saw me, froze in place, his face draining of color. "Catherine." His voice was a whisper of disbelief. I wanted to demand answers, to hurl accusations, but my throat constricted. Miranda quietly slipped past me, mumbling something about giving us privacy. Ethan stayed rooted, eyes flicking between me and the retreating figure of his first love. "Why?" I finally croaked, tears stinging my eyes. "Why are you here with her, Ethan? Or should I ask, why am I not enough?" He closed his eyes for a moment, exhaling as though bracing for a blow. "Catherine, let's go inside and talk." Inside was the lavish penthouse suite, a spacious living area with floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the skyline. A plush sofa, a half-empty bottle of wine on the coffee table. I noticed a sweater tossed over a chair, women's clothing. My stomach turned. He motioned for me to sit, but I remained standing, arms crossed over my chest to keep from trembling. "Catherine, it's not what you think," he began, his voice tight with nerves. "Miranda and we've been in contact for a while. She came to Boston for personal reasons and I cut him off, hating the sound of my own voice cracking. "You've been seeing her, haven't you? All those trips. You were meeting her." He didn't deny it. Instead, he raked a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I'd only seen a few times before. "She reached out to me months ago. She'd left her previous life behind and wanted to reconnect. Catherine, I didn't." "Didn't what?" My eyes burned with tears I refused to shed. "Didn't mean for me to find out? Didn't mean to marry me when you still loved her?" The raw anguish in my words was met with a grim silence. Eventually he mustered, "I thought she was gone for good. When she reached out, I realized I had unresolved feelings. But I never wanted to hurt you." His admission pierced my heart like a knife. I pressed my lips together, trying not to scream. "Unresolved feelings," I repeated numbly. "You married me as a placeholder. Is that it? Because you knew I couldn't have children, so you didn't have to worry about a messy future? Because you could just pick up and leave when she came back?" He stepped forward, reaching for my hand. I jerked away, hatred mingling with heartbreak in my eyes. "Catherine, I'm so sorry," he whispered, sounding more anguished than I'd ever heard him. "I never meant to toy with your life. But Miranda and we have a history that goes back years. We planned a future once, and she left unexpectedly to follow her dreams. I was devastated. So, yes, maybe at first I married you because I was lonely. I thought I could move on." I let out a short, bitter laugh. "Instead, you used me as a convenient shield, waiting for her to come back." Now she has. So what now, Ethan? Are you leaving me? He paused, guilt etched across his features. I don't know yet, he said. I want to do the right thing. I stared, disgust warring with pity in my chest. Then let me do the right thing for you, Ethan. If you want to be with her, you don't have to hesitate. You can have your divorce. You can have your life with Miranda. My voice trembled on the last sentence. I loathed myself for how badly I still wanted him to ask me to stay to fight for me. But his silence told me everything. He was no longer sure, and that uncertainty was as good as a confession of his true priorities. My tears finally spilled over. Don't worry, Ethan, I choked out. I won't hold you back. With that, I grabbed my handbag and fled the suite, ignoring his calls for me to wait. My heart pounded in my ears as the elevator doors slid shut. By the time I reached the lobby, my tears were unstoppable. I pushed past curious onlookers, stepping onto the city streets with no clear destination, only knowing I had to run from the pain that threatened to suffocate me. Chapter 7. A Hollow Return. I left Boston the next day, not wanting to spend another moment in that city of shattered illusions. The flight home felt endless, each moment replaying Ethan's words and Miranda's face in my mind. When I finally walked through the front door of our house, I half expected an empty, echoing space. Instead, I was greeted by the same old furniture, the same subdued lighting. Everything seemed eerily normal while my inner world lay in ruins. For the next week, Ethan did not return. I waited for a phone call or a text, anything to clarify where we stood. But all I got was silence. A hollow, desolate kind of quiet that made me think of an abandoned stage after the final curtain has fallen. I busied myself with work, finishing design orders and delivering them to local boutiques. The world outside my personal disaster went on as usual. Parents cooed over their children, friends laughed at cafes, life buzzed with energy. I felt like I was watching from the outside, invisible and numb. One afternoon, my mother called to invite me to a family gathering. I lied and said I was sick, not wanting her or anyone else to see the shadows under my eyes. My father texted me about a new project he was working on in his garage, but I left his message unanswered. I couldn't face them, not in my shattered state. On the 10th day of Ethan's absence, I found the courage to pack a suitcase for myself. A single question circled my thoughts. Should I leave him first? He had broken my heart, yet I still clung to some foolish shred of hope. Maybe if I gave him space, he'd realize he loved me. Maybe if Miranda left again, he'd come back. Shame flared in me at the thought. I despised how my emotions twisted in contradiction. One part of me wanting to hold on to him, the other part raging at his betrayal. Ultimately, a sense of self-preservation pushed me to act. I stuffed clothes and essentials into a bag, planning to stay in a hotel for a while. But just as I was zipping up my suitcase, I heard the front door open. My heart lurched. Ethan's footsteps resounded in the foyer. I stood there, hands trembling around the suitcase handle, uncertain whether to bolt or confront him. He walked in wearing the same suit from Boston, looking pale and exhausted. Our eyes met, and for a moment neither of us spoke. Then he noticed the suitcase. A flicker of alarm crossed his face. "Catherine," he said, stepping forward. "Are you leaving?" I straightened, swallowing the bile in my throat. I don't know, I managed. "You didn't come home. You didn't call. What was I supposed to think?" Guilt flashed in his eyes. "I'm sorry. I was in Chicago. I needed time to think. To think about whether you want to be with Miranda?" My voice was bitter. He hesitated. "It's complicated." I let out a hollow laugh. "Complicated. Right." He reached out, gently taking hold of my arm. "Catherine, let me explain. Miranda told me she's pregnant." The words fell like a hammer blow. "It's mine," he added quietly. All the oxygen seemed to drain from the room. My mind reeled. She was pregnant with his child. He was going to be a father, something I could never give him. A part of me had always feared this day would come, but hearing it confirmed was worse than I'd imagined. I lowered my gaze, tears slipping down my cheeks. "So this is it then," I whispered. "The final proof that you've never truly been mine." His grip on my arm tightened, desperation flickering in his eyes. "I'm so sorry," he murmured. "I never intended for this to happen. Miranda and I, look, she came to me months ago. We were reckless. I wasn't sure how to tell you." I pulled away. Don't you dare tell me you feel guilty for me. I'm done, Ethan. I can't live like this. You have a child on the way with another woman, your real love. Go be with her. He didn't deny that Miranda was his real love. Instead, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Catherine, I'd like a divorce, he finally said, voice almost a whisper. I need to do right by Miranda and the baby. I'm sorry. I closed my eyes, letting the tears fall freely now. I had imagined a million ways this marriage could end, but hearing those words still tore something vital inside me. Fine, I managed. Consider it done. Chapter 8. The Unraveling. The following days passed in a blur of legal documents, hushed phone calls, and tears that dried on my cheeks before they could even fall to the ground. Ethan moved out of the house, presumably to be closer to Miranda. I moved into a spare bedroom, as though distancing myself from the memories that haunted our matrimonial suite would ease the pain. We didn't speak much. Lawyers handled most of the details. The house was in both our names, but ironically, it was paid for largely with my own savings from a small inheritance. Ethan offered to let me keep it. I wasn't sure I wanted to remain in a place that would remind me of our hollow union. Yet I lacked the energy to fight. If he wanted me to have the house, fine. What difference did it make? I vacillated between rage and sorrow. One moment I would despise him for using me so callously, for lying and concealing Miranda's presence. The next I would be consumed by shame, convinced that I had never been worthy of a lasting love, that my inability to have a child made me less of a woman, less of a partner. On a particularly bleak afternoon, I decided to see a therapist. It was a quiet office downtown with pale green walls and an armchair that reminded me of my grandmother's living room. Dr. Simmons was a patient, warm lady who listened without judgment. She guided me to talk about my childhood, my self-image, and the dreadful guilt I carried regarding my infertility. Catherine, your worth as a person is not defined by your ability to bear children, she gently reminded me one session. It's tragic that your marriage ended, but please remember that you have value, you have a future. Her words were balm for my wounded soul, though I knew healing wouldn't come overnight. I continued with therapy, slowly peeling back layers of self-blame. I began to see how I had latched onto Ethan's approval, how I believed that if he chose me, it meant I was still a whole woman despite my medical condition. When the day came to sign the final divorce papers, a strange numbness settled over me. We met at the lawyer's office, a sterile room with a polished wooden table. Ethan looked tense, Miranda by his side. She was modestly dressed, a gentle swell visible beneath her shirt. The sight of her pregnant belly triggered a fresh wave of anguish that I struggled to hide. Ethan cleared his throat. Catherine, I cut him off, swallowing my pain. Just sign, Ethan. It's what you want. He lowered his gaze and scribbled his signature. I signed too, heart pounding in my ears. Miranda hovered behind him, gaze flickering from me to the stack of documents. I wondered if she felt any guilt, but her expression was unreadable. The lawyer took the papers, offered a polite nod. That should finalize everything. You'll receive confirmation in a few days. I stood abruptly, not trusting myself to speak. Without a word, I left, ignoring Ethan's attempts to follow. Once outside, I gasped in the cool air, tears prickling at my eyes. It was done. I was no longer Catherine Walker. Just Catherine, alone again, with an empty ring finger and a heart that felt freshly broken. Chapter 9. Fragments of Me. In the weeks that followed, I sank into a quiet depression. The house felt massive, an echo chamber of memories. Every piece of furniture seemed haunted by the presence of a man who was no longer there. I wandered from room to room, aimlessly rearranging items, seeking comfort in the routine. But the silence grew suffocating. Sometimes I caught my reflection in mirrors around the house and barely recognized myself. Hollow cheeks, shadows under my eyes, shoulders slumped. I realized how much of my identity had been wrapped up in this marriage, in being Mrs. Ethan Walker. Now that it was gone, I felt like a blank slate, uncertain how to begin again. One morning I ventured to the attic, a space I'd rarely used. Sunlight filtered through a small window, illuminating the dust motes swirling in the air. I rummaged through boxes until I found my old painting supplies. In my younger years I had enjoyed sketching landscapes, attempting to capture the shifting hues of the sky. But life's disappointments had driven me away from that passion. Spreading out a canvas on the floor, I picked up a brush for the first time in years. At first, I stared at the blank canvas, paralyzed by a tangle of emotions. Then slowly I dipped the brush into blue paint and began to swirl it across the surface. Stroke by stroke, I poured my sorrow into the colors, the deep blues and grays representing the storm inside me. Tears slipped down my cheeks as I painted. Yet for the first time in weeks I felt a semblance of release. The world outside might see me as the betrayed ex-wife, the childless woman cast aside for a pregnant lover. But here in the solitude of the attic, I had a chance to express the tumult in my soul without words. I also resumed my work designing children's clothing, though it felt bittersweet. Sketching tiny outfits still pricked at my deepest wound. But ironically, the very pain of my unfulfilled motherhood seemed to fuel my creativity. I found solace in imagining how a child might delight in these colorful dresses and shirts. If I couldn't have a child of my own, at least I could bring joy to others. One day as I worked in my studio, my phone chimed with a text. It was from an unknown number, but the message read, "Catherine, it's Miranda. Can we talk?" My heart lurched. For a moment I considered deleting it, but a strange curiosity compelled me to respond. I typed back a single word. "Why?" She replied almost instantly, "I want to see you just once. Please." I set the phone aside, uneasy. What could she possibly want from me now that she had Ethan and his child on the way? Did she want to gloat or apologize? I had no idea. My first instinct was to refuse, but something held me back. Perhaps it was the sense that I needed closure, or maybe a part of me yearned to understand the woman who had undone my life. After hours of internal conflict, I texted back, agreeing to meet in a public cafe the next afternoon. My heart throbbed with trepidation, but I hoped that confronting Miranda face to face might help me pick up the shards of my own identity and move on. Chapter 10. An Unlikely Conversation. The cafe was situated on a quiet corner, known for its herbal teas and homemade pastries. I chose a small table by the window, the midday sun casting a warm glow across the wooden floors. As I waited, my mind churned with possibilities. Would Miranda apologize? Justify her actions? When she walked in, I recognized her immediately. Shoulder-length brown hair, a weary grace in her step, the slight curve of pregnancy more pronounced than before. She spotted me and approached cautiously as though unsure of her welcome. "Catherine," she said softly, sliding into the chair across from me. Her gaze lingered on my face, searching for signs of hostility. "Thank you for meeting me." I nodded, wrapping my fingers around the warm teacup. "What do you want, Miranda?" She exhaled, folding her hands on the table. "I suppose I want to explain, or at least try to. I never intended to hurt you. When I left Ethan years ago, I was chasing a dream: music. I went abroad, thinking it was my only chance to make a career. I didn't realize what I was leaving behind until it was too late." I studied her expression, noting the regret etched into her features. Still, a flicker of resentment coursed through me. "And when you came back, you found him married," I said, my voice trembling. "But that didn't stop you." She flinched. "No, it didn't. I know it was selfish, but seeing Ethan again brought back everything I'd felt before. He was never over me, and I still loved him." She swallowed hard, glancing at her growing belly. "The pregnancy wasn't planned, but once I found out, he insisted on doing the right thing." I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "The right thing? You mean divorcing me and leaving me alone?" Her eyes glistened with tears. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I can't imagine what this has done to you. But I also know that Ethan was never fully yours to begin with, because a big part of his heart was never free." I stared at her, a wave of pain surging through me at the blunt truth. "So you're telling me my entire marriage was doomed from the start?" He hesitated, then nodded. "I think so. He tried to move on, but he couldn't. We were each other's first love, Catherine. That's not an excuse for what happened, but it's the reality." My chest tightened with fury and sorrow. "Do you honestly think he loves you enough now to be a real husband? Or is he just chasing a dream that died long ago?" Her eyes flickered with uncertainty. She pressed a hand over her belly, protective. I believe he wants to make this work. For the baby's sake, at least." We sat in thick silence for a moment, the muffled chatter of other patrons surrounding us like static. My emotions churned: anger, envy, pity, even a strange sense of understanding. Finally, I found my voice. "Miranda, you have what Ethan has always wanted: a child and the memory of a love he idealized. But please, don't come to me looking for absolution or comfort. You two did what you did and I'm left picking up the pieces. She nodded, tears brimming. I know. And I'm not asking you to forgive me. I wanted you to know that Ethan did care about you in his own way. He spoke of you with respect, said you were kind, that he admired your resilience. I think he hates himself for hurting you. I closed my eyes against the sting of tears. That doesn't change anything, I whispered. I can't pretend my pain vanishes because he feels guilty. A tear slipped down her cheek. No, of course not. I'm sorry. I looked away, blinking rapidly to keep from crying in front of her. If that's all, I'd like to leave. She opened her mouth as if to speak again but then simply nodded. I stood, grabbed my purse and walked out. The sun outside was glaringly bright and I felt its heat prickling my skin. My chest was tight, yet strangely I sensed a tiny kernel of release. The confrontation was painful, but at least now I understood the shape of my past and the illusions that had governed my marriage. I walked aimlessly for a while, letting the city's bustle flow around me. Eventually I found myself sitting on a park bench watching children chase each other in the grass. The scene tugged at my rawest wound, my own inability to have kids. But I also felt the faint stirrings of something else. A realization that the life I had clung to was never truly mine. Maybe now, free of that illusion, I could forge a path that belonged solely to me. Chapter 11. A door left ajar. My life settled into a subdued routine. I continued therapy with Dr. Simmons, painting in the attic when the grief felt unbearable, and working on children's clothing designs. I found solace in simple pleasures. The aroma of fresh coffee in the morning, the warmth of a cozy blanket as I watched late-night movies, the hush of the neighborhood at dawn. Each little comfort was a reminder that I was still here, still breathing, still capable of finding fragments of joy. Occasionally my mother would ask about Ethan, her voice laced with quiet concern. I told her the basics. We had divorced, he was expecting a child with another woman. She was furious at first, wanting to confront him on my behalf, but I insisted she let it be. The damage was done and no amount of parental indignation could mend my broken heart. Then one crisp autumn afternoon my phone buzzed. The caller ID surprised me, Ethan. I hesitated, chewing my lip before pressing the answer button. Catherine. His voice came through, soft yet insistent. I realize I have no right to ask, but could we meet? There's something I need to say. My chest constricted. You want to meet? I repeated, incredulous. After all that's happened? I know it's too much, he said, sounding strained. But please. Just this once. A part of me wanted to refuse outright, to preserve what little peace I'd managed to rebuild. But curiosity, or maybe an urge for proper closure, won out. Fine, I said stiffly. At the coffee shop on Elm Street. Tomorrow, 5 o'clock. He thanked me quietly, then hung up. I stood there with the phone in my hand, wondering what new pain or revelation he could possibly bring. That night I barely slept, half expecting him to cancel. But the next day as dusk fell I found myself inside the small, cozy cafe on Elm, a steaming mug of hot chocolate before me. Ethan arrived soon after, looking haggard. His once carefully groomed hair was slightly disheveled, dark circles under his eyes hinting at sleepless nights. He approached my table, hesitated, then sat across from me. Thank you for seeing me, he murmured, folding his hands together. I said nothing, waiting for him to speak. He cleared his throat, fidgeting with the edge of a napkin. I'm not going to ask for forgiveness. I know what I did was unforgivable. But I also wanted you to know that Miranda lost the baby. My heart jolted, conflicting emotions assaulting me. Sympathy, sadness, a flicker of guilt for harboring so much resentment. Oh, I whispered. I'm sorry. He nodded, eyes downcast. She miscarried last week. It was sudden. She's heartbroken. And he shook his head, words failing. A heavy silence stretched between us. I could see tears shimmering in his eyes, though he tried to hide them by looking away. After a moment he continued, I realized something, Catherine. I was living in a fantasy, trying to reclaim a lost past. And in doing so, I destroyed the present, the marriage I had with you. Bitterness flared in me. I appreciate the realization, but it comes too late, doesn't it? He winced. Yes, it does. I know that. I wanted to tell you how deeply sorry I am. I used you. I see now that you deserve better. You always did. I stared at him, heart heavy. What about Miranda? She's staying with her family, he answered softly. We don't know if we'll remain together. This whole ordeal opened old wounds, exposed flaws we tried to gloss over. She feels guilty, I feel guilty, it's a mess. A hush fell over us again, broken only by the ambient chatter of other patrons. I wrapped my hands around my mug, warmth seeping into my palms. Finally I whispered, I hope she recovers. Losing a child, that's devastating. He swallowed, tears finally spilling over. Thank you. Catherine, I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but I want you to know I did value you. I just couldn't let go of my past. And in the end I lost everything. I closed my eyes, absorbing his words. Strange sympathy mingled with my lingering anger, leaving me exhausted. In a quiet voice I said, I don't hate you, Ethan. I hate what you did. Maybe one day we'll both heal from this. His shoulders sagged in relief or sorrow, I couldn't tell. Thank you for hearing me out, he whispered. He rose to leave, pausing as though he wanted to say more. But I merely nodded, unable to form any more sentences. He left, the door chime tinkling faintly behind him, and I was alone again with my thoughts. I sipped my lukewarm hot chocolate, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. Painful as it was, that conversation felt like a door left ajar, neither fully closed nor wide open. Perhaps it was the best I could hope for now. Chapter 12. Finding my own path. After that meeting I noticed a subtle shift in my perspective. Though the ache remained, I no longer felt chained to bitterness. Ethan had wronged me, yes, but he also was suffering consequences I wouldn't have wished on anyone. Miranda's miscarriage weighed on my conscience, stirring empathy where once there was only resentment. I continued therapy, discussing the jumbled mix of sorrow and relief at Ethan's confession. Dr. Simmons encouraged me to focus on my own future, to rebuild my life with intention. It's natural to empathize with his pain, she told me, but don't let it overshadow your journey toward healing. With renewed determination I threw myself into my craft. I expanded my freelance business, reaching out to new boutiques across state lines. My designs garnered positive attention, and soon I was shipping pieces to a handful of shops in neighboring cities. The success was modest, but it felt like a step forward, a reclaiming of my identity outside of marriage. Meanwhile, I developed a surprising friendship with a local gallery owner, Lydia, who admired the paintings I created in my attic. She convinced me to exhibit them in a small community art show. At first, I balked, embarrassed by the raw emotions scrawled across those canvases. But eventually, I realized it was an opportunity to let go of the heartbreak, to transform it into something that might resonate with others. I spent late nights refining each piece, layering colors to depict the turbulent storms of my past, the lonely silhouettes, the glimpses of dawn. When the show opened on a crisp Saturday evening, I stood in the gallery, watching visitors pause before my work with thoughtful expressions. Their murmured compliments and questions filled me with a strange sense of validation. I had poured my soul into those paintings, and seeing them appreciated felt like a gentle balm on my spirit. A month or so later, my mother convinced me to visit the countryside house where I grew up, insisting fresh air and family warmth would do me good. I obliged, driving along winding roads lined with autumn leaves. The old house greeted me with a nostalgic embrace. My father was in his workshop tinkering with some antique furniture. My mother fussed over me, cooking hearty meals and plying me with homemade pie. One evening, as we chatted on the porch, the setting sun painting the sky in oranges and pinks, my mother took my hand. Catherine, she said softly, I'm so proud of you for standing up for yourself. I know this divorce wasn't what you planned, but your life isn't over. I squeezed her hand, eyes misty. I'm trying to believe that. Some days are harder than others. She nodded, pressing a gentle kiss to my temple. Just keep going, my dear. You have so much to offer. Love, creativity, empathy. Don't let one tragedy define your entire life. That night I slept in my old bedroom, under the same floral quilt I'd had as a teenager. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sort of peaceful acceptance settle over me. My path was uncharted, yes, but not hopeless. I might never have a child of my own womb, but life held many other forms of fulfillment. Art, friendships, maybe adoption or foster care someday if my heart led me there. Chapter 13. A Chance at Renewal. Returning to the city, I realized that my house, once oppressive in its emptiness, felt more like a canvas now, open to the possibility of reinvention. I began redecorating, switching out Ethan's austere furnishings for softer, brighter pieces that suited my aesthetic. I repainted the living room a warm cream, hung new curtains, rearranged the furniture to create a cozy nook for reading. One afternoon while organizing the attic, I found the wedding album tucked in a box. My hand trembled as I flipped through the pages. Ethan and me cutting the cake, smiling at each other in those stilted wedding poses. I saw my own eyes in the photographs, filled with naive hope. A lump formed in my throat, but I refused to let it consume me. Deliberately, I set the album aside. Instead, I placed a newly finished painting in the open box. It depicted a woman standing at the edge of a cliff, the ocean stretching before her in vibrant blues and golds. I labeled it Catherine's Dawn, then carefully sealed the box. Perhaps one day I would revisit it, but for now it felt symbolic, closing the chapter of my marriage while safeguarding the lessons I had learned. Around this time, Lydia invited me to a gallery mixer. It was a small, informal gathering of artists and art enthusiasts. I nearly declined, social events still made me anxious, but I forced myself to go, reasoning that it was another step toward rebuilding a life of my own choosing. The gallery was bustling with animated conversations and clinking glasses. I lingered near my paintings, occasionally chatting with passers-by. At one point, Lydia introduced me to Andrew, a soft-spoken man with an eye for abstract art. We hit it off, discussing technique, color theory, and the emotional resonance of certain pieces. He mentioned that he taught art therapy classes at a local community center, helping individuals cope with trauma or mental health struggles through painting and sculpture. Something in that idea fascinated me, using art to heal, to rebuild. I confessed that painting had become my lifeline after a heartbreaking divorce. He listened with empathy, nodding in understanding. Art therapy can be transformative, he said. If you're interested, I could show you around the center sometime. A tiny spark of excitement lit within me. I'd love that, I replied. And so a new door opened. That weekend, Andrew took me to the community center, a modest building with brightly colored murals on the outside. Inside, he introduced me to some of his students. Young adults battling depression, older individuals grappling with grief, teens struggling with self-image. I watched in awe as they poured their hearts into clay sculptures, watercolor landscapes, expressive collages. Later, as we walked through the hallway lined with student artwork, Andrew smiled warmly. It's amazing, isn't it? People come here broken, scared, and they find a way to let out what's inside. Sometimes that's all it takes to start healing. I recalled my own swirling strokes of paint in the attic, the tears that had fallen on canvases. I understand exactly what you mean, I said, voice hushed. In that moment, I felt a surge of gratitude for the second chance life was giving me. I had lost a marriage that was never truly mine, endured betrayal and heartbreak, but now I stood on the verge of something new. Perhaps I could share my own experiences, help others discover the solace I'd found in creativity. The future felt uncertain, but for the first time, it also felt expansive, like a canvas waiting for my brush. Chapter 14. Walking Forward. As the months passed, I became more involved at the community center, volunteering with Andrew's art therapy sessions once or twice a week. It was fulfilling work, helping others express their struggles, guiding them to transform pain into beauty. I saw reflections of myself in many of the participants, individuals who had been bruised by life but refused to remain broken. Meanwhile, Ethan remained a distant figure. Occasionally, I'd hear updates through mutual acquaintances or from Lydia, who had once designed promotional materials for his hotels. Miranda had left the city to recover from her miscarriage. No one was sure if Ethan and she remained together. Part of me still wondered about them, whether their bond would endure the tragedy. But mostly I chose not to dwell on it. One crisp winter afternoon, I found myself painting at home, the aroma of hot cocoa filling the living room. My phone rang and I saw it was Ethan. My heart gave a small jolt, but not the pang of panic I once felt. More of a curious flutter. I answered, my voice calm. Hello, Ethan. He paused as though collecting himself. Hi, Catherine. I wanted to let you know I'm selling my stake in the house. My lawyer will send the documents soon. I wanted you to have it free and clear. I stood by the canvas, brush in hand, evaluating my own reaction. That's generous of you, I managed after a moment. Are you leaving the city? Actually, I'm going abroad for a while, he confessed. I need time to get my head straight. Miranda and I parted ways. She's with her family and I'm lost. A flicker of sympathy tugged at me, but I kept my voice neutral. I'm sorry, Ethan. I hope you find what you're looking for. He let out a shaky sigh. I just wanted to say thank you. For everything. For being patient, for showing me kindness even when I didn't deserve it. I'm sorry again for how everything ended. Exhaling softly, I set the brush aside. I'm learning to forgive, Ethan. But I hope you also learn to forgive yourself. A brief silence ensued. Then he murmured, Take care, Catherine. I wish you happiness. With that, we ended the call. I stood there for a long moment, tears glinting in my eyes. Tears not of sorrow but of a strange acceptance. The final tie that bound me to my old life was loosening. Ethan was moving on and so was I. I felt neither triumph nor bitterness, only a quiet sense of finality. That evening I finished my painting. A landscape of a horizon bathed in early morning light, signifying the promise of a new day. I titled it Resolution. Epilogue. A gentle light ahead. I stand in the community center's art room, the late afternoon sun streaming through tall windows. Around me, several participants are working on a group mural. Pastel blues merging with bright yellows, swirling together to form a hopeful scene. The faint odor of paint and clay dust saturates the air, comforting in its simplicity. This is my life now, guiding others to find healing through art, even as I continue to heal myself. I still have days when a memory or a stray comment triggers the old ache. Reminders that I once was a wife, bound to a man who never truly belonged to me. But those moments are less frequent, their sting less potent. I've come to realize that heartbreak, while devastating, can also carve out space within us. Space that can eventually be filled with empathy, passion, and a deeper understanding of our own worth. Sometimes I think about children, about adoption or perhaps fostering. The idea no longer feels like a mere fantasy or a desperate plea for validation. If I choose to pursue it, I will do so because it aligns with who I am, not because I need to prove anything to a husband or to society. My womb may be barren, but my capacity to love is not. In the corner of the room, Andrew is helping a teenage girl shape a clay figurine. He catches my eye and smiles. There's a warmth in his expression that makes my chest flutter. An unspoken invitation to something more than friendship. I'm not sure where it might lead, but for the first time, I'm open to the possibility that I deserve genuine affection, untethered to past regrets. Behind me, the group mural starts to take form. Sunrise hues, silhouettes of people reaching for the light. I pick up a brush, dipping it into a vivid orange paint. With a careful hand, I add my own contribution to the sprawling tableau. A small bird in flight, wings stretched wide toward the dawn. It's a symbol of freedom, of release from the cage of old wounds. My phone vibrates in my pocket. A quick glance reveals a text from my mother, telling me she's proud of me, that my latest designs sold out in a new boutique. I smile, my heart swelling with gratitude. Leaning in to place the final strokes on the mural, I recall the young woman I used to be. So anxious, so eager for acceptance that I blindly entered a loveless marriage. And yet, that journey, painful as it was, led me here, to a life defined not by illusions but by authentic self-discovery and compassion. Outside, the sun begins to set, casting a golden glow through the windows. The group murmurs their satisfaction, stepping back to admire the nearly completed mural. I see hope reflected in their faces and I realize it mirrors my own. In that gentle light, I silently vow to keep moving forward. The road that brought me here was strewn with heartbreak, but it also shaped the person I am becoming. Resilient, empathetic, and unafraid to love again, even if that love takes a different form than I once imagined. I set down the brush, stepping back to appreciate the mural in its full glory. A hush falls over the room as everyone contemplates the artwork. A shared effort, a testament to healing. In the hush, my thoughts crystallize. This is my life, redeemed from the ashes of betrayal. And for the first time, I see that every stroke of pain has contributed to the masterpiece of who I am today.